This episode is brought to you by OUN, a new Indigenous-led organization out of Standing Rock. Hello and good day, relatives. I want to welcome everybody back to the New Tradition Podcast. My name is Jeremy.
And I'm Collins.
And we're really happy to have everybody back. I want to extend a huge thank you for everyone that continues to share out the podcast, bringing more people to the table. It's been amazing to see all of the response. So we're really happy to know that what we're bringing to the table is resonating with you. And we want to be able to continue doing that. So, if you appreciate what it is that you're doing, consider going to our website, www.thriveunlimited.com. And finding ways that you can support either through our merchandise or through becoming a patron. But by all means, please like, subscribe, and share to the podcast, and continue to share it with the relatives, because all of this movement is growing and it's a beautiful thing. So with that being said, today we have a really interesting episode to be able to bring to you, and this is something that's been a little bit of a conversation between Collins and I as of recent months, as we continue to kind of work through our own personal healing, and then also in the spaces of relationship. And it's this concept of codependency, and it's a term that we hear pretty often, but a lot of times people don't always fully understand what that means or what it's referring to. So it's something that's really prevalent in our Indigenous communities as a result of historical trauma, and we just kind of wanted to discuss it a little bit to make it a little bit more clear about what it is and exactly how it functions, so that it can be something that we can either remove or improve in our lives.
So we may not know what codependency is. I feel like I've recently kind of started to understand what it actually means. And for myself, when I look back at my own life and my own personal journey, I can see parts of my journey where I'm like, whoa, that was me. So codependency in my own experience, or in the way that I can share it with others, is people pleasing. So I remember there being a point in my life where it was absolutely necessary that everybody around me was well taken care of. But it was almost to the point of exhaustion. It was to the point of resentment for others around me, because they weren't putting in that 1,000,000% that I was into taking care of their needs aside from my own, and making sure that they were well aside from my own. And I didn't realize that that's actually a codependent behavior. Making sure that everybody around me is constantly in a state of well-being and happiness. And fast forwarding a little bit, even now in our own family, recently there was a point where I was helping one of our daughters, and in the moment of trying to, fix the situation and make sure that she was feeling well or happy or whatever it may have been, I actually took a step back and I checked in with her, are you okay? And she said no. And, I asked her, did you want to talk about it? She said no. And I said, okay. And then I let it be that. That's probably the first time I've ever done that. And on my end, I had to tell myself, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. I had to reaffirm to myself that she was going to be okay, and that I was going to be okay. And once I did that and was able to affirm with myself that, this is going to take care of itself. She's gonna have to feel those feelings of what she was going through, and how important that was, because if we're not feeling what we're going through, how are we going to heal what we're going through? And so what ended up happening from there, it almost brought I wouldn't say immediate calmness. It brought a feeling maybe about half hour after the situation of calmness, of peace. And myself and our daughter were able to come together, and it wasn't like we were angry with one another, but that space was needed to let her know that she's having these huge feelings, but she's still supported in the moment, and she will continue to be supported at any time that she's having those feelings. And I think that a lot of people don't realize that, and I can only speak about it now because I had just gone through it, and it was such an eye-opener for me. And I was thinking wow, had I known this when I was younger, that it's okay to step back. It's okay to not be constantly happy. And it's okay to not constantly attend to others' feelings or to constantly feel like you have to save everybody around you. And in these moments of being a mother to our 4 daughters, this was huge. This was a huge growing point for me. And I think back on our communities and how our people don't realize that. We are in a space of constantly giving, of constantly doing for others other than ourselves.
Yeah. It's important to bring it to the table, because a lot of those behaviors we pick up, and when they're misconceived through like the lens of culture in terms of being in service to people, you know, it makes us kind of like we take it to an extreme that it's kind of like almost being loyal to a fault. You know what I mean? Where you kind of look at people with immunity and you don't necessarily realize where the toxicity stops, you know, like where you're supposed to kind of draw your healthy boundaries and stuff. And I know that this concept of codependency, that it's something that it's I guess in the easiest way that I've heard it described is just a need to be needed, you know. And a lot of times in our relationships, we don't realize how prevalent it is, because it's become so normalized in our community that it's become such a prominent thing that nobody thinks to question it anymore. It's accepted as a normal behavior, when in reality, when you really get down to the meat of it and understand what it's about, it's incredibly toxic, you know, and very detrimental on all sides, because on one hand, it causes you to enable people to kind of continue their difficult behaviors, you know, but at the same time it becomes detrimental to you, because it's just exhausting to always try to be there and to show up and be the one to always fix everything. You know what I mean? So it's an unhealthy type of relationship on both sides, you know. And I know that it's something that's rooted in historical trauma, and I think for the majority of an Indigenous people, it comes from that boarding school era of having our parents replaced by, you know, school matrons and the overseers that were there at the schools, and those kind of becoming like parental figures, so to speak, but not in a healthy way, you know what I mean? And what they instituted, like within our upbringing that wasn't necessarily there before, was that you had to earn love. Like, you know, you were in effect, when you were born into this life, they looked at you as if you were worthless and you had to earn love. But, you know, like that's a tool of colonization and subjugation. And when you're raised in that kind of environment, when you're not taught that you're innately valuable and lovable and worthy and things like that, you know, like you get kind of like addicted to praise, because that's the only way that you come to know love, you know. When we grow into our adult spaces, and when, you know, if we enter into relationships, or maybe if it's even in families, you know, when we're constantly bending over backwards for people trying to serve them, and they're not there saying thank you and, oh, you did so much for me, and celebrating you, then we become hurt, because we begin to feel invisible and worthless again, because we're not receiving that praise, so to speak, you know. And part of it is, you know, our ego, I guess in a fragile space, not wanting to be invisible, because it's kind of like we no longer exist kind of thing, which necessarily isn't true, but nonetheless, that's how our minds have come to understand it, because that's what we were taught. You know, if you don't earn this love, you know, you're worthless kind of thing. And it puts us in a space where we're always needing to be needed. Like we mistake attention for love in that kind of space. You know what I mean? So even just in that, in the most base nature of what codependency is, it's really toxic just when you carry it within yourself, because you're not able to effectively like recognize love in the way that it's supposed to be.
I feel like the other side of that, though, is although we're constantly looking for that praise, there's also the negative praise that we're also seeking. And, you know, most recently we did experience this where, or even in my own experience, you know, seeing so many family members when we were little kids, that the only way that they knew how to get attention was by doing negative things. So by getting into trouble constantly, because although they weren't receiving the attention that they wanted or the praise that they wanted, they were still getting that interaction. They were still getting that, not necessarily affection, but human interaction. Like it's really like hard to explain how somebody could become used to that, but it's also very understandable how somebody could become used to that. And it's really, really sad. You know, I know that's as a result of the boarding school era, you know, of of being either the golden child or the scapegoat.
Yeah.
And depending on where you fell within those two realms is how you started to deal with life. And we see that trickling down into our families, into our own families. But I think the important thing is to continue to do your research and recognize, like, whoa, this isn't healthy at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where, like, when you're not raised in an environment, again, that you're surrounded or being facilitated by parents who understand how to be affectionate and express love, then, you know, like, the only kind of attention that you're familiar with is harsh, you know, attention, basically, like getting in trouble. And if you're being neglected and ignored, then, you know, and you're looking for some kind of love or attention, you train yourself to, like, crave whatever attention that you can get. So again, you act out, and even if it manifests as someone yelling at you and punishing you, at least you're not being neglected or ignored.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And it seems so backwards, you know, from an outside perspective, like, why would you do that? That makes no sense. But in that space, it makes total sense, you know, because as human beings, we need love. We are love. You know, you're supposed to be raised and be facilitated in environments that's exchanged back and forth freely and openly, you know, like you know, acceptance isn't a bad thing, you know, like, we're supposed to belong. And I think that in itself is where we learn, like, codependency as, like, a tool to cope, and then also for survival. On one hand, you know, we have an ability to pick it up when there are difficult things already present in our life, because maybe it makes us feel better to always be the hero, you know, to always be the one that is helping someone or is fixing something, you know, because there are other parts of ourselves in our lives that we're not proud of or we don't feel good about, you know. Or in that space of being a survival tool, you know, that's just one of the ways that we don't disappear, you know, in our own mind or something. You know, we learn codependent behavior just as a means to somehow stay connected, even if the connection is toxic.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And I think that's so big, because I feel like when I think back on that part of it, is like, in my own life, my own space, and a couple of the scenarios was, you know, living with somebody who was abusive and having them constantly rage out over little things and feeling the abuse from that. But then maybe an hour later they were fine, and they were like, oh, let's do this and this, and want to spend so much time with you, and you're like, oh, okay, they're okay now. But constantly doing that back and forth is a form of codependency. You know, they still love me, they still care for me, and I'm going to continue to enable them to treat me in this way, and that's not okay. And I don't think that a lot of people see that. Or another form of codependency is unhealthy attachment in our relationships. And another example, you know, unfortunately, I do have a lot of examples, is, you know, growing up, I seen the women in my family constantly cater to their men. And not that that's a bad thing, you know. I feel, at least now, that men and women should be doing that for one another in a healthy space. Yeah. But so much, it was almost like to a fault, because I seen them, you know, iron and starch the clothes of their loved ones, fix them plates constantly, braid their hair, bend over backwards for this person, for them to only give them peanuts. Yeah. You know, and it was like, why do you do that? You know, and in my mind, I didn't know that was codependency, but it was also making me feel really hurt for my loved one and very angry for my loved one, where I felt like I had to be at the forefront to be the voice for them. But also not understanding that these people were full-grown adults. Yeah. And that they had the power to make their own choices. So it's that, when I say that as a codependency and that unhealthy attachment, it's like, I'm going to keep doing this and this and this and this for you to show you how much I love you, but you're not giving me that love back. It's only like when you show a little bit of that love, it's like, yes, now they understand, they get it, they see my worth and they see my value. But they don't. Yeah. And a lot of people don't realize that's not healthy and it's not good. And, you know, that's, once again, as a result of the boarding school era and as a result of everything that had occurred prior to that. From my understanding, you know, in our relationships from our traditional days, hence we are the new tradition, is our men and women walk in balance, and they take care of one another. Like, I am a reflection of you, you are a reflection of me. And understanding that there's balance within the home and balance within each other and in the way that we carry ourselves. And right now in this lifetime, we know that the balance is off.
Yeah, I think any healthy relationship is kind of expressed with reciprocity, in a way that there's mutual benefit in it, and it's a two-way street, and people understanding that without having it to be demanded or given an ultimatum, you know what I mean? But I think too often that doesn't happen in the way that it's supposed to, and a lot of times it comes out one-sided, like you were talking about, because of just the way that all of these influences over the course of generation have changed our value systems. And like it's kind of come to a place of not understanding that fine line between like servitude and reciprocity. You know what I mean? Like, you're not necessarily meant to just like be of servitude to the point of a fault, like you said. Like, no matter what, you just keep giving and keep giving and keep giving. You're supposed to kind of embody it in that concept of like help others that help themselves, so to speak. You know what I mean? And it's not always just supposed to be bend and break yourself to the point of exhaustion just to make sure that someone else is okay when they don't give that back to you. You know what I mean? And I think that concept of servitude in terms of loving care for one another in that space of reciprocity is healthy. Like, you're supposed to do that for one another when it's given back and forth, you know what I mean, when it's compensated like that, but not when it's just a one-side thing where, like, say between, like if it were you and I, where one of us just keeps pouring into the other one and the other one just has their own, life or whatever going on elsewhere. But I know that that's something that's really prominent in our Indigenous communities, and it's something that we've grown up, like you said, watching our parents go through, or our aunts and uncles and things of that nature, even grandparents, those different types of relationships. And it's good that we're having conversations like this at this point in time, because we have an ability to change what all of that looks like, and be able to redefine it in a new space and create something better moving forward, so that hopefully it doesn't continue to travel forward into future generations, but that we can teach something different. But of course, like it really does come down to the point of recognizing where either healthy or unhealthy attachments are existing, and I know before we sat down to record this episode and we were kind of tossing the idea and brainstorming about it, we had talked about how both of us have had experiences with this codependent behavior on both sides of the table. We've played both of the roles, and I know that for myself, I too had experienced a point in my life of being in an incredibly unhealthy relationship, and the manipulation that came about out of it caused me to just completely lose sight of myself. And the only way that I could see myself worthy of even breathing, was to be of service to someone, and at that point in my life, I was just giving everything to this individual to try and create something good, because I was taught to see so much bad in myself, which in hindsight didn't even exist, you know what I mean? And it brought me to a place where like I can see how easily people can fall into that, when you're extending from from abusive environments, either from childhood or maybe even just in an adult abusive relationship. It can develop in that kind of space. But anything that serves that unhealthy space of teaching you that you're not worthy, that you're not lovable innately, that you have to earn love, or you know what I mean, that's in a space of manipulation, it's going to result in codependent behavior. And it's incredibly difficult to see sometimes, or to be able to identify, again, because it has become so normalized, or your mind just gets caught in that frame of whatever that relationship is. If you're constantly being talked down to or abused or whatever the case might be, then that's all that you know what I mean? And you're going through and you're just trying to just like anybody else, you want to be loved, you want to be accepted, and things of that nature. But I know that one of the things that we had talked about was the kind of insecurities and things that it brings up in us, you know what I mean? And sometimes we get so caught in that need to be needed or to be praised, so to speak, so that we can feel like we're worthy of something, that we don't realize maybe how unstable we are in our own like self-esteem, so to speak, you know, and how it is that in that space, you know, we have to be really careful because it can kind of continue the cycle back and forth, you know what I mean? And it can make that, you know, healthy relationships that we have the potential to enter into, it has the potential to make them become very difficult and unhealthy as well, because we're bringing just those unhealthy attachments to the table, you know, those kind of unhealthy expectations, you know. So
I feel like with what you're saying, though, there's a part of it that does have to be careful and about the relationships to understand. Once you reach that space of, I guess, being healthy, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily perfect or that you've arrived, but I feel like it's being able to understand, okay, I still have growing to do here. And this is how right now I need to be loved or feel loved.
Yeah.
And that's important. And pushing that part aside real quick, I did want to add on to this other piece that you had talked about. You were talking about like the unhealthiness in a previous relationship, but also understanding that codependency, it doesn't just have to be in relationships. It could be your relationships with your friends, or even your siblings, or families constantly belittling one another, talking down to each other. And the moment that a person tries to get away from that environment, it's like, no, come back. You can't leave me. I'm going to be all alone and I'm going to be sad. You better stay here so I'm not sad. And that's not okay. That's really, really toxic. And in my own experience, like, especially with friendships, like, I remember bending over backwards for my friends constantly, so much to the point where it just made me feel completely sad because I had nothing more to give, but I was giving my last $5 to help this person, helping them until I was mentally and emotionally exhausted. And they couldn't show up for me in the same way. And that's what really hurt me. But understanding now, like, whoa, that was really codependence. And that's there. I feel like there comes a point where you have to tell yourself to stop. You know, all of that energy that you're pouring into others, you can pour that back into yourself. And I feel like that's a huge part of the growth process, is to understand that the love that you give others, you have to give yourself too. So I guess, what are some tips that we can provide that, you know, to recognize codependency, or how to stop it, or you change the pattern?
Yeah, I think one of the first ways is being able to recognize it, you know, first off. So being able to kind of take into account these different relationships that you feel may be really challenging, you know, and if you're feeling exhausted in terms of giving so much, especially emotionally speaking, but also, you know, if it's something that's pulling on you monetarily or whatever the case might be, you know, is it something that you feel like is taking more away from you than it's actually giving back? You know, that's one way to be able to identify, you know, because any relationship that exists in a space of, again, reciprocity or reciprocation, it's not going to make you feel exhausted, because whatever you're giving out is being given back to you. You know what I mean? It's a mutual benefit type of situation. But in these codependent relationships, it looks like somebody just constantly leaning on you and placing the responsibility on you of making them feel happy, or making them feel loved, or making them feel beautiful, you know, because it's something that they're genuinely not seeing about themselves. You know what I mean? But even that in itself, you know, like that's a very difficult burden for another person to carry, because we all have that responsibility to ourselves, and that's more than enough in and of itself. But having to carry that for someone else it's impossible. It really is, you know, because there's nobody on the face of the planet that really has the time, space, or ability to just completely forget about themselves and just live their life for you in the way that it's portrayed in the movies and things. You know what I mean? But I think being able to understand where to set healthy boundaries, you know what I mean? Not only with other people, but with yourself. You know what I mean? So being able to know when to say no to other people in terms of what it is that they're expecting, and being okay with them being uncomfortable. You know what I mean? Like you had expressed before, being able to just let it be, you know, like you don't always have to comfort people or make them feel good about whatever it is that they're going through. You know, that's their life and their own responsibility. If you comfortably have something to be able to give that can help, then that's okay, you know, but it shouldn't be something that just breaks you or takes your last little bit, you know what I mean? It's something that you should feel good about giving to, you know, just for the sake of just being able to give it and let it be, that you don't have to expect anything in return, or that it's not straining you, you know, so to speak. So being able to set those healthy boundaries of knowing when to say no, knowing how far into your space people are allowed to kind of venture, you know, but also with yourself, setting those boundaries to be able to say, I need to know that this is my healthy stopping point, and anything past this is me overstepping the bounds into someone else's life and into their problems and into their issues so much that I begin to make it my own, or take ownership of where it is that they are, you know, because anywhere that anybody ends up in their own life, they have an accountability to, you know, unless you just somehow directly put them there, you know what I mean, that doesn't belong to you, and it's not your responsibility to carry them through it or lift them out of it. You know, there's a reason why it exists in their experience, and 9 times out of 10 there's something that they're needing to be learning. But if you keep throwing yourself in front of it and putting that burden upon your back, you're not really helping. You know what I mean? Like in the immediate space, you're giving them comfort, but they're going to continue being confronted with that lesson for the next 10 years if you keep doing that for the next 10 years. Right. You know what I mean? And there comes a point where if we really love people, sometimes we have to let them, you know, go through the pain of growing, you know what I mean? And being uncomfortable and recognizing that there are certain things within themselves that need to be worked out. But a lot of times that's what happens in these relationships, is that boundaries aren't necessarily established, or if they are, they're way further than they need to be. You know, they're really not healthy, you know. So I think the most of it, though, it really comes back to self-accountability, you know, and what we're saying here isn't something to shame anybody, you know, because I would say a good 90% of us either are in this space of codependency or have been at one point in our lives, and it's a natural like reaction, you know, it's a natural construct of mind that comes about when you're enduring abusive spaces, or when you're, you know, operating as in a space of subjugation. And sometimes we come out of it naturally, other times we need help, you know. It just depends on the people in the environment and the environment itself, you know. But even in that space of setting boundaries, that's one of the things that we have to take into account is what is our environment, you know. Is our environment, you know, to blame for what it is, you know. Is it necessarily us, or is it because we're surrounded by other codependent people, or is it because we're surrounded by all of these people that are looking at us to save them, you know what I mean? So a lot of times your environment can make you look crazy, you know what I mean, or make you feel like there's something wrong with you, but in reality, like, if you were to step outside of that environment, then all of it goes away. You know what I mean? So I guess being able to be accountable to ourselves in terms of being discerning and saying, what am I really involved in? Who am I really involved with? And where are my boundaries being set in terms of with myself and with other people? You know, I think that's one of the most effective ways to kind of combat codependency, or to be able to work ourselves through it and understand. You know, a lot of times though too, it does take some outside help sometimes to be able to navigate it, because it is so intricate, you know, whether it be counseling or, you know, coaching, therapy, things of that nature.
In the morning time, we were listening to the YouTube video about codependency, and the specialist or the doctor was talking about all these, not necessarily symptoms, but just what codependent behavior means, or what it could look like. And she was naming off all these different examples, and I remember sitting there and thinking like, whoa, that's me, and that's me, and I did this, and recognizing it not only in myself but you as well, but also realizing at the same time, like, that's okay. And I think that's part of the journey that, you know, the hope is to get to, is realizing that it's okay to be human, and it's okay to have had those experiences or reacted in this way, but the benefit is when you see that had happened and it's not okay and that it's actually really toxic, and then moving forward from that. And when I say that, technology is at our benefit right now, I know there are so many times, I'm looking on Pinterest. That's my favorite place to look for like self-love tips. And it doesn't just mean taking a hot bath. It doesn't just mean like soaking in water. It really means diving deep and affirming yourself and loving yourself and caring for yourself. And oftentimes it may sound taboo, but it's necessary. It's necessary because self-love is what's going to get us out of the codependent behaviors.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's, it really is the most important piece, because again, it's rooted in those experiences that have taught us that we're not deserving of love, or that somehow we have to earn it, or make way for it, when in the reality is just in the simplicity of our being, we are deserving of it. But at the same time, there is a responsibility that we have to acknowledge in terms of living up to that,
right,
that potential. I think a lot of times culture has kind of, or dominant culture, I should say, has taught us to say, well, you should accept me as I am, and he's such a good man because he just loves me for who I am, or she's such a good woman because she accepts me for my faults and all. And, on one hand, while that's beautiful and that I'm sure feels like a blessing, at the same time, that's a really irresponsible way to live, to not choose a responsibility to be at your best, but to be able to say, I know I'm a terrible person, I know I have this, and this, but you better love me for it anyways. You know what I mean? Like, that's not a very loving thought.
Well, can I just,
in and of itself.
Can I just add to that real quick? Is that today's society doesn't really help us in that either, as far as like our movies and music, because how much music do we listen to today? It's like, girl, like, I'm treating you bad and I didn't mean it and I'm gonna run off, but you're gonna love me anyway, know? And it's like, whoa, that's not cute. That's not really, even romantic.
Really like, manipulative.
Yeah, or even the movies. How many times, for both male and females, are they constantly just going back and forth, and that's like what movies make us see how relationships should be. Where one person's just totally messed up and the woman just sticks through thick and thin, and also a lot of toxic masculinity where men are posting things like, she ain't a real one if she isn't sticking by me even though I'm cheating on her, but she's still there cooking me a full course meal. That's a real one, and it's like, no, that's toxic. Or vice versa, toxic feminism, where like, if he isn't bending over backwards for me and catering to my every need, then he's not a good man. And it's like, oh my gosh, like, be quiet, everybody, like, calm your minds down.
I think all of that, the dominant society and the media that moves around, it's all very focused on being self-centered, because that's what sells, you know what I mean? Like, that's what keeps people buying all the self-soothing techniques and being involved in certain things, you know what I mean? Like, as long as you keep people in a difficult space and challenging them, then you have a problem to solve.
Right.
You have something to sell, you know what I mean? So of course they're not gonna necessarily encourage everybody to be good human beings or good men or good women or be of integrity, because that doesn't contribute to their bottom line, I guess, so to speak. But
right.
In the spaces of our communities and what it is that we're really in need of in our own personal well-being, what that really looks like, these are things that are necessary, but it really does come back around to self-love and giving yourself the space and time to really get to know yourself. A few episodes back, we had a conversation about self-love, and we got a lot of good response from that. I think it was something that resonated with a lot of people, and happy to hear that. And I hope that people understand that that's what we mean when in the context of our conversation. What we mean when we say self-love is literally having a relationship with yourself and getting to know yourself intimately, in terms of the good and the not so good parts of yourself, the beautiful and the not so beautiful parts, and being able to I guess confidently acknowledge yourself as a whole being, you know what I mean, to say that there is a balance within you, that you're not perfect, and perfection is kind of an illusion, so to speak, but being able to give yourself space to be human,
Right.
to not be perfect, and to understand that it's okay for you to go through struggle. It's okay for you to feel upset or angry at different times and things, but it's not supposed to be something that stays with you. Like being able to understand that if I acknowledge that I went through something, then and only then do I have an opportunity to work it out of my life. And if we, avoid it or consciously, no, I'm better than that, I don't deserve that, then it holds us in that place. And until we choose to lean into it and open it up and say, you know what, yeah, that did happen, now what's next? Then we have an ability to move it out of the way. But when we don't do those things, that's what leads to kind of these, like codependent type relationships or toxic relationships or things within us, because we're carrying around things that, if we don't work through them, and I show up to you, then they become your problems too,
Right.
even though you didn't ask for them. You know what I mean? So it's something that in our own space we have to be accountable and responsible for, because if we don't work through them, then it's going to create problems for not only us, but our loved ones as well,
Right.
in the future.
And that's true. And I feel like when you have a partner such as one another, and everything that we've learned so far, that people should understand that even if you sometimes we come to the table with that baggage that we didn't realize that we had, and if your partner can help you through that and help you understand, then that's huge and that's important. I know that there's been a few times that you've helped me through my own things that I didn't realize were still there, that were still very deeply rooted. But something I feel like people might question is, well, what's on the other side of codependency? What exists there? And it probably feels like unfamiliar territory.
Yeah.
And I can only speak from my own experience, and everything that we've been doing to work past that is peace and love. And not to say that we're like kumbaya, all the time or whatever it may be, but there's a sense of peace and well-being, and that feels really beautiful. And how that extends into our home and our children, I mean, I couldn't ask for more than that.
Yeah. I think a lot of times too, that uncharted territory is terrifying to some people, when you're so used to being, I guess when you're so used to have operated in those kind of toxic spaces for so long, a lot of times when we do enter into those healthy spaces, it's almost traumatizing in and of itself, because all of the things that were so familiar to us, all of the ways that we distracted ourselves, all of the ways that we learned to cope, they become useless. You know what I mean? And all of the things that we were used to engaging in and feeling, they no longer exist in the same space that they do. And it's kind of like everything that you used to hold on to kind of stabilize yourself now disappeared, and you're left to stand there on your own. And even though ultimately in the long run that's what you're ultimately seeking, when you actually reach that space, it scares the hell out of us, because, well, what if I fall? Well, then you're going to fall. You know what I mean? And then you're going to get yourself back up. Well, it's like, well, I'm used to grabbing onto this, and I've never fallen before. And it's like, well, falling is a natural thing. It's okay. You're going to get through it. It'll be all right, because now you have the tools and you have even more of a foundation of resiliency to build yourself back up in an even better space, but just the anxiety of being in that space of, this is unfamiliar territory and I don't know what's going to happen. You know what I mean? I've always had this kind of assurance of these things, even though maybe they weren't so healthy. At least I could rely on them to be there. But now you're telling me I'm in this space where it's all up to me. Oh my God. You know what I mean? And it's interesting because in thought, we look forward to that space, and oh my God, it's going to be so beautiful when I reach that place where life is so wide open and I can just do whatever I want. You know what I mean? And I can choose it to be however I want, and I won't be reliant on anybody, and I won't have these kind of relationships and all of this kind of stuff. And again, in thought and in theory, it looks amazing, but then when you actually get there, then it's like, whoa, this is a little bit different than what I thought. And it's not that it's bad or that it's unhealthy or anything. It's just that it's new and it's unfamiliar, So I think just it's one of those things, like you have to be courageous in it, like fear is going to be there. Fear is a very real emotion, and it's ever present even in the most courageous people. But kind of in that thought of courage is actually doing something that you're absolutely afraid of, and doing it in spite of the fear, so being able to recognize that that's a natural part of life. But I think, again, like, it's just a misperceived expectation that society gives us that everything is somehow supposed to be comfortable.
Right. Something that I would like to add on to this conversation, though, with the codependency, is that oftentimes we mistaken crisis for attention.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is when people are constantly in a state of crisis, and maybe not even necessarily wanting to attract those things, but somehow you do, and realizing the attention that you're getting is your codependency as a result of that. Yeah. And when I think back on that, on my own life and so many other experiences, like, holy smokes, like, that was me, and at some point you have to take accountability for that and say no more.
Yeah.
And that's a huge part of the codependency too, that once you can look at it in the face and say no more, then you can continue to step in your journey, and then you can continue to recognize it in other areas of your life, and that's so incredibly important. And I feel like, along with that self-love, what are some things that we could encourage everybody to do to want to move in the space of self-love?
I think some things that I would suggest would be to not be afraid to seek some outside guidance in terms of either counseling or coaching, something that would allow you some external perspective about the relationships that you're involved in, especially if you're not sure if they're in a space of codependency, being able to present that to someone else and to say, what does your outside perspective think about this? And these are the dynamics of the relationship. And that being an outlet to find guidance as to how to effectively come back around to that relationship and begin to set those healthy boundaries, and to be able to communicate in a healthy way how that needs to be resolved, or how it needs to be brought into balance. Because I think if we just turn directly into those relationships and our counterparts aren't in the conversation of healing, or are necessarily open to see if there's something that's out of place, it could very quickly go in a negative direction. You know what I mean? Especially considering that codependent relationships, ultimately aren't healthy. You know what I mean? And it could, very well turn into an abusive space, and we don't want that to happen to anybody. But that being said, via our website, where the podcast is hosted at www.thriveunlimited.com, we are constructing a Indigenous wellness directory, and you can find it there on the website. There's a tab specifically for it, and it's something that is in progress. We do have resources listed there, and there's a section at the bottom. If you are a provider, or if you are someone who has an ability to offer services, you can send us your information, and we'd be happy to review it and post it there as well. But we're trying to just assemble that in the space of so many people, especially during the pandemic, having to address relationships, because we're having to spend so much more time together, and it's bringing out a lot of different dynamics in family and in intimate partnerships, and things that we haven't necessarily had to confront before, because most of the things that we used to do to distract ourselves are no longer on the table. We're really having to face a lot of things, which is good in the long run, but we don't want to leave people without, somewhere to turn to. So there are some online resources there, and they're, categorized by the state and, services and things that they provide. So, but yeah, I think that would be my greatest suggestion in it. A lot of times is we have a tendency to always kind of keep to ourselves, especially when we're in the space of facing challenges. But one of the most empowering things that you can actually do is to reach out for help and find some outside perspective.
I'd also like to add a few more things onto that, is that the codependency, to start overcoming it, is the self-love. Get out and do something that you love doing or enjoy doing, and don't wait for anybody else's permission to do that. Granted, if you have kids, you might have to not necessarily ask your kids, but take them with you so that they can start their journey too. Other things, I had mentioned it just a little bit earlier, was, one of my biggest resources is Pinterest. And as silly as it may sound, it's one of my greatest tools because I can look at anything I'm looking for in terms of wanting to heal myself and take that accountability that my healing doesn't rest in anybody else's hands but my own. And also looking online, researching books, and also, like you said, those outside resources. On our website, though, there's plenty of, well, I wouldn't say plenty. We have a good list there of people who are willing to work with anybody that may or may not have insurance. They do have sliding scales, and also people who are willing to, what is the word I'm looking for when they do it remotely? Remotely, yes. And that's very important. So, the resources are there, and we're all in this journey together to help one another.
Absolutely. So I think with that being said, we've reached a good point where I think we can conclude. So to everybody out there that tuned in, thank you once again for joining us. We're always happy to be able to bring these kind of conversations because they are much needed, know, and ultimately that's the goal of this platform, is to create a new tradition for our people rather than continuing to operate in these spaces of survival and being rooted in trauma, but rather being able to put healthy concepts and values back into our individual persons, our families, and our homes and our communities. So if you did get something good out of it, if you did enjoy it, please share it with your relatives. The more people that we bring to the table, the more benefit it has for our community. And this episode is brought to you by OUN, a new Indigenous-led organization out of Standing Rock. With that being said, we'll see you next time.
Thank you, everybody. Doksha.
No, Haiti.